I'm back. Good afternoon. Welcome, Rotarians, guests, and people joining us on Zoom to the Rotary Club of York. We are the 26th largest Rotary Club in the world. Thank you, John Kleindens. I am your president-elect, Aaron Jacobs, filling in for Glenn Miller. We are a club not just of service, but service above self, to the point where service becomes self. We would ask you to take a moment to make sure your devices are silent. Our opening song will be God Bless America by Brian Tate, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance, invocation by Dave Hogue, and our visitors will be introduced by Ron Bunce. Brian.
Thank you, President-elect Aaron. Rotarians and guests, please join me. God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with a light from above. From the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans wide with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let's give thanks. Oh God, we thank you for revealing yourself through the miracles of nature and through the ever-present way you have guided the course of human events. For millennia, your hand in history has built up and torn down kingdoms, has spread the Greek, Roman, and English languages to facilitate international communication, and has led us on the winding path of history to where we stand today. We thank you for motivating those of us who explore amazing features of our past and for moving them to share with us that we may grow in wisdom. Thank you also for moving us beyond crisis with the COVID pandemic as lives begin to return to a new normal. Make your grace and mercy known in those parts of the world that wrestle with the evil of the struggle for power, whether in the form of war or political or religious violence. In all of these forms, evil tears lives apart, and we ask that you bring healing. We pray that you bless Rotary with growth and success in serving others as we honor the four-way test. Thank you for the food you've provided for us today. We ask your blessing on it and on those who have prepared and served us to us today. Amen.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm pleased and honored to introduce today's guests. When I call your name, please stand and remain standing until President-elect Aaron welcomes you. Ken Martin, guest of Jeff Vermeulen. Laura O'Grady, guest of Brian Grimm. Evelyn Pristios, guest of Dino Pristios. Rich Wagman, guest of Carol Wagman. Kendall Menzer, guest of Eric Menzer.
Well, thank all of you for coming today to be a guest of the Rotary Club of York. It's a privilege to have you. We hope you come and visit us again. And if it feels right, think about becoming a member. Rotarians, please help me welcome our guests today. Now, you may have noticed, as I certainly have, that I am not President Glenn. President Glenn continues to recover nicely from his procedure and sends his regards to the club. He has asked me to assure you all that this, even though what it looks like, this is not a bloodless coup. Glenn will indeed return to the podium with great relief and applause from our members as he reclaims what is rightfully his. We continue to send Glenn our well wishes for a swift recovery. On to announcements. The membership committee will meet today immediately following today's program downstairs in the Mixed Grill. The RCY board will meet tomorrow on Zoom at 8 o'clock. And the membership committee held an orientation before our program today for new members. And this was really cool and exciting because we're doing something new because now we have the mentor program. They've been introduced to their new mentors and been matched up. So we're going to see how this goes. And I would say I'd like to kind of call attention to all those who have volunteered to be a mentor. So if you could, if you're a mentor for new members, would you please stand to be recognized? These are what the cool Rotarians look like. Thank you. And now I'd like to invite Darren up to give us an update on the Love for Community.
Hello, everybody. This is going to be a bit more rote today as opposed to my little ad-libbing because I don't want to miss anything. There is so much exciting stuff happening with the auction, I think, or with the event this year, the golf, tennis, croquet, everything that's happening. And I'm just super proud right now what you guys have all done. I think we're going to do better than we've ever done. And this is going to help us make sure this goes off without a hitch. All right. So right now, the auction opened at noon today. We have a silent auction, as you guys know, and then we have a live auction. And so that is happening right now. And so we're going to go through just a couple of the items on this silent auction that you can bid at right now. In fact, you can even get out your phones and sign up for this and start contributing money as we speak to win these great prizes. So first off is the Cape May Retreat. This is a beautiful single family home and a private community in North Cape May. It's just minutes from Delaware Bay sunsets, downtown Cape May and Cape May beaches. It's 3 beds, 2 baths, modern outdoor shower, deck, pit, fire grill. And it's offered for 3 nights and 4 days. And the auction item was generously donated by President Glenn Miller. Next, again, these are just some of many items we have. Next is a downtown weekend. This is an escape package, features an overnight stay in a luxurious suite at the newly renovated Yorktown Hotel and a night out of entertainment at the Appel Center. This item was generously donated by the Yorktown Hotel and the Appel Center. And then finally, we have a Music Fest weekend. This item, it's 4 2-day dugout passes to the inaugural White Rose Music Fest on October 7th and 8th this year at People's Bank Park. Nationally known music acts include Jamie Johnson, Grace Potter, the Woods Brothers, Mango Pierce, and many more. This item was generously donated by Eric Menzer. All right, so make sure I don't miss anything here. So again, there's live and silent auctions. The live auctions, they're going to be, you have to be in person. So if you haven't signed up, we have plenty of spots left for dinner. You please join us for that evening on September 12th. It's going to be a fantastic time. So again, you should have received an email, and in that email, it's going to be directions on how to access the silent auction. There's also on every table, I was super impressed by Lynn. She figured out how to do these QR codes. And so you just hold your phone over the little slip on your table. That'll bring you right to that website. So Daniel, if you could bring up the web page for, so this is where it's going to take you. You are going to need to establish a login and password for this, and you can do everything online. You can see he's already on the auction page. It's going to take you to the main page, but he clicked auction, and that's what brings you right here. And so you can just scroll down and see all the items. And actually, Dan, if you could scroll right back up to the top, I see somebody has already bid $525. So whoever that is, thank you. This is, way to go. That's the Rotary spirit right there. I love to see that. I wasn't expecting it. So as you scroll down, you can just see all the items. And I believe, when you bid on them, then you'll get notified, if somebody outbids you. So you can even start right now. And this goes through 6:30 p.m. on September 12th. So again, it's the retreats, the downtown, the music festival. And you could just bid away. So let's see. Yep. Bid early, bid often, please. And join us in person. Again, dinner's only $75. So you sign up on the website. I'm sure you all have that email as well. Now, so before I bring up Chris, there are 2 presenting sponsors. We can't thank them enough. They've helped make this just one of the best events we ever had. It's Fox 43. And look, Chris is going to tell you about them a little bit. And then also Jeff with North Industrial Chemical. He's, as you know, a little bit more on the humble side. So I'm going to sing his accolades because he stepped up in a big way this year and can't thank him enough for doing so. So thank you, Jeff with North Industrial Chemical. Chris.
The good news is Jeff ceded his 20 minutes to me. Fox 43 is very, very happy to be a part of this. My staff understands that under duress, we do make this donation, but they understand all the good that we do as Rotarians. And I look forward to us breaking more and more records this year for our fundraising. As you know, the live auction is part of all of that. Anyone who's been to a restaurant in the past 4 years should understand how to get in and get into the auction site. We've got 5 days. You've got 5 days prior to the auction ending to be able to get in and bid. Please do so furiously and vigorously. And despite what Darren said, I don't know if you have to be here in person for the live one. 419-260-1810. Call me to let me know what you'd like to bid. I'll take your money any way that you'd like to let me know that I can take it and give it to our wonderful Rotary Club. So thank you again very much. And let's hope that the rain holds off on Monday. I will talk to our meteorologist about that. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Darren, and all who helped to put this together. JT Hand, what are the chances that that $525 came from you to bid on me to work at your house? Because it's highly likely he'll spare no expense to have me do backbreaking labor at his leisure. And now I'd like to invite Brian Grimm up to do a presentation on the Literacy Committee.
Thanks. Good afternoon, everybody. As all good Rotarians, I'm sure you all have read the International Rotary Magazine September issue. Yeah, for those of you who haven't, shame on you. But the main story is about the gift of reading. The Literacy Project in Guatemala inspires children to dream big. Rotary International supports children's literacy, and this club does as well. And I'm going to try to tell you a little bit about what we do as a committee. The Rotary Club of York's Literacy Committee has put more than 1,000 books in the hands of children in York County. More than 1,000. We are a small but mighty committee. If there's anyone in the committee out there, could you please raise your hand? I see 2. All right. So you see we're small, but we are mighty. Hopefully this will inspire some more folks to come forward. I think we have 7 altogether, if I recall. Studies show that the presence of books in the home has a greater influence on a child's level of education than does the parent's income, nationality, or level of education. Just having books in their house. Think about that for a second. This 20-year study shows how investing in books can make a big difference. Yet more than half of families living in poverty don't have children's books in their house. Each March, the Literacy Committee makes the commitment to children by asking our fellow Rotarians to contribute to the annual book drive. Funds raised have benefited children in after-school programs, preschool programs, elementary, middle, high schools. You name it, somebody has a book from us in this county. We understand that children who have access to print reading materials have better literacy outcomes. It's hard to learn to read and write when you don't have a book to practice on, right? It's pretty simple. Some of our beneficiaries include Crispus Attucks, WellSpan and Memorial Hospital's maternity wards, Family First Health reading centers, York Day Nursery, Logos Academy, the YMCA, the YWCA, York Academy. Did I say them already? It's pretty much everyone. All the city schools, elementary schools, or the school district of the city of York also receive books from us. For more than 20 years, we've been doing this. You'll see some pictures up here. They're back from 2000 of our literacy committee. I was not here, but those folks were here to gather books. We've provided glasses, books, guest readers, volunteers, teeny tiny shirts, education to adults on the importance of reading and children, information on how to access free literacy services, guest speakers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now a little history. In 2008, the Literacy Committee assisted past District Governor Dr. Ben Hoover with the Read With Me project. Collaborative funds were raised from this Rotary Club of $6,000, as well as $5,000 from 5 other Rotary clubs in York County. Past President Brian Tate helped secure $3,500 from the York County Community Foundation. Packages were given to all new mothers when leaving the hospital with their newborns. Each package contained Steps for Good Beginnings chart, a children's book, a t-shirt with Read With Me in the Rotary wheel, a Rotary card, Literacy Council and York Library Systems pamphlets in Spanish and in English, and they distributed about 4,000 of these to new moms. How cool is that? Second collaboration we had was Through the Eyes of Our Children, was another one with the York Lions Club in 2014. In addition to providing information to parents regarding their children's insurance, the literacy committee funds paid for 15 eye exams, 14 pairs of new glasses, and 13 new lenses for the children of the York City School District. How cool is that? Last one is 2017 to 2019. We saw the beginning of the Reach Out and Read program, a partnership with local pediatric and family healthcare providers, including Family First Health. In addition to books being given to Family First Health's reading corners, some of us Rotarians volunteered. We were taught techniques from the York Literacy Council to volunteer to be guest storytellers in the waiting rooms of these hospitals, so that when children were waiting for their appointments, they were getting read to. It was a pretty cool experience. We also funded books for the doctors to give to the children, and doctors would prescribe to their parents and caregivers that they were supposed to read age appropriate books. So the importance of literacy in our lives is evident now more than ever. I just read this week about fourth graders reading at second grade level, second graders not even being able to read. And this just rolls all the way down and all the way up. It's a huge issue right now. And we know that getting books into these children's hands is really the first step in starting to bridge that gap and fix these deficiencies. So with that, we are going to bring up President Wheeler to celebrate International Literacy Day, which is September 8th, tomorrow. We have joined with the Literacy Council, Commissioner Wheeler, to proclaim the week surrounding September 8th, York Literacy Week. And we encourage club members, families, and friends to turn off their TVs and to read a book. With that,
thank you, Brian. It's great to be here as President Commissioner, but also as a fellow Rotarian. So on behalf of the Board of Commissioners, I have a proclamation to read and share with you all. York Literacy Week, September 7th through the 14th, 2022. Whereas all adults in York County have a right to read, write, and speak English in their everyday life situation, and adults with limited literacy skills seek to improve these basic language skills, and the citizens of York County wish to decrease poverty and the need for public assistance, increasing learning and growing. And we should join together to ensure that all adults in York County should be encouraged to read, write, and speak English. Now, therefore, we, the Commissioners of York County, Pennsylvania, do hereby proclaim September 7th through the 14th, York Literacy Week, given this day in York in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania on the 7th day of September in the year of our Lord, 2022.
Thank you, Brian, and thank you, Julie. And now onto our program. I'd like to introduce the 26th coolest past president of the 26th largest Rotary Club in the world. Past President John.
Actually, when I was president, we were the 35th largest club. So I give kudos to all of the presidents that succeeded me in building the club. My honor today to introduce our speaker, Joe Wagman. Joe is chairman of Wagman Construction Incorporated. Somewhat related to that, but starting with an art history class in college and a couple of dig participations during his college year, he developed an active interest in archaeology. Anticipating retirement, he took classes on a part-time basis at Dickinson College and graduated with a bachelor's degree in archaeology in 2016. In 2021, he completed a master's program at the University of Pennsylvania focused on the Mycenaean civilization. Take notice how that rolled right off my tongue. I practiced. Each summer in the recent non-COVID years, he spent 2 to 3 weeks on digs in Greece. Joe will discuss the results of his most recent dig that took place in June of 2022. The goal of that dig was to investigate the possibility that a first order Mycenaean citadel linked by Homer to Achilles existed on the Acrolamia. Joe told me that one. Acrolamia, which is actually a hilltop in Lamia, Greece. Fellow Rotarians, Joe Wagman.
Well, I think it's all good if we have a hobby. And I might overshot the mark a bit. I probably should have thought more about stamp collecting or model train layout, but here it is. And I'm really excited to be here today to share a little bit with you because I think it's fascinating. I have a bias on it, but it's just cool stuff. So let me tell you a little bit. First off, I love this promotional piece for the movie Troy because it is so incredibly inaccurate. There is nothing about the weaponry or the armor that they have Achilles in. I just want to start my timer here so I don't abuse that. That is at all accurate for historical. In fact, if you know enough about the Mycenaeans and you see the movie Troy, it's like a comedy more than an adventure story, but it's fun. And Brad Pitt, you know, who would be better for Achilles, who was the protagonist of Homer's write-up of the Trojan War, a 10-year effort to, if you take the storyline, recover Helen, the wife of Menelaus, who launched 1,000 ships, all which is ridiculous because if there was a Trojan War, it was all about the Mycenaeans wanting to sack Troy and take the gold and take the population and particularly take the women, because that's what they did. They were a rough bunch, and you're going to see sort of their penchant for military activity and the wealth that they accumulated. So let me give you a little bit of textual background in terms of chronology and geography that we'll be dealing with. So here we have, let's see if this, oops, I'm hitting the wrong one, sorry. Get back. Well, that really forwarded. Sorry about that. I'm on the, okay. So here's Mycenaean Greece up here. And then just to show you some of the neighborhood at the time, and we're dealing with the late Bronze Age. So what is amazing about this is, if you think about it, 1600 BC to 1200. Now the Greeks that we think of, the classical Greeks, you know, they're like 600 to 300. So we're talking about a group that was around 1,000 years before the classical Greeks that most of us are familiar with from school. So in the area, you have over here to the right around here is Troy. And this is the Anatolian Peninsula, and the Hittite civilization at the time was in control of that. And then moving to the right are the Middle Kingdom Assyrians and the Kassite Babylonians. And then if we come down to Egypt, we've got New Kingdom Egypt. Now, all these civilizations are highly sophisticated. They've got writing, they're trading brides, they're trading fancy gifts, they're signing treaties, they're having occasional wars with each other, almost all about trade. But they're very highly civilized. So our focus today will be on the Mycenaeans up there on the upper left. And Achilles came into focus with Homer around somewhere in the 800 to 700 BC timeframe, writing down these ballads that were told by bards by campfires for hundreds of years from the Mycenaean era down to his time frame. And finally, somebody is writing them down because they were all orally transposed before that. And he tells the 10-year siege of Troy. And Achilles is the main character. But what's really interesting about the Iliad, and although most of it, it's got, you know, some bits of accuracy, but most of it is tale. And there is a chapter in it called the Catalog of Ships. And most authorities on the work believe that that particular chapter is probably older than the Iliad and was picked up and massaged a little bit by Homer and then dropped into the Iliad, because it has been amazingly accurate in saying what Mycenaean citadels existed and where. And what Homer did was associate each citadel with one of the heroes of the Iliad. So he goes through Agamemnon from Mycenae and Nestor from Pylos and a number of, and all those have been found. There are only, of the number of citadels he mentions, there are only two that haven't been located. The one is Odysseus in Ithaca, on the island of Ithaca, and the other is Achilles. Achilles, of course, being the primary proponent of the whole story. So what does Homer say about where Achilles was from? And in the catalog of ships in the Iliad, he talks about Achilles coming from this area, Pelagesian Argos, and these three towns, Alos, Alope, and Trachis, where the Myrmidons were, and Achilles was their leader. So that's where he was hailing from. If we look at a map of Homeric Greece, and the pointer, I don't want to disrupt the slides like that again. So you can see a little bit of height. In fact, I'll use mine and see if this is a little less contentious. Right in here, and I'm going to show you a blow up of that, but this is where those three towns are. And here they are, a little more. It's at the end of a Spurchus River Valley that comes into a bay. If anybody would like LASIK ash-boards, I'm going to discount it. So these are the three towns that Homer mentions as the area where the troops that Achilles is bringing with him to Troy came from. So let's look at just a little more background information on how this mystery evolves. And here are some of the major Mycenaean citadels in Greece. Some of you may have been to some of Mycenae is certainly very traveled, but we're looking at this area right here. And what's really fascinating about that is we've got Mycenaeans up above, we got them definitely below. And I'll show you in the next slide, the things they looked for in an area to site a citadel. And all of those are here in this area that Homer says Achilles came from, but we don't yet have a citadel there. So what did they like? They liked high hills, acropolises that were easily defensible and impressive to build upon, a fertile agricultural valley, water, of course, important trade routes. That was a very big issue for where they would site a citadel, and ideally a bay nearby, because land travel was really difficult and it was best to do it by ship. And then a quarry, of course, because as you'll see, they built big stuff with big stones. This is I apologize for the bad photography by me, but it's a diagrammatic mock-up of Mycenae. And we're going to talk about just a couple points so anybody who doesn't know anything about these guys, you'll have a sense of what they were accomplishing. So this is the Mycenaean citadel of Mycenae. And this is the Lion Gate entrance. This is called Grave Circle A, where a bunch of the items I'm going to show you in a second for the material culture were found. Because the sad thing is in archaeology that there aren't too many unplundered tombs. Most of them have been robbed over the years. And so and of course, if you leave a nice sword on the ground and leave town, it isn't going to stay there for long. So things that weren't buried tend to disappear. So much of what we have is from the few unplundered tombs that are found. And then the last thing we'll look at Mycenae is there's an amazing underground water cistern structure that was built in the back part of the citadel. Now these walls, when they were originally built, they're about 16 feet thick, and the Cyclopean, they called them Cyclopean stones because in history they thought, well, nobody could move a stone like that other than a Cyclops. And then on top of that would be a mud brick structure. So they're probably 30 feet high, 16 feet thick. I mean, very serious construction. There's a person right here. So you can get a sense of how big that wall is and how large those stones are. And this is the pathway going up to the Lion Gate at Mycenae. And it was intentionally basically built as a killing zone because they were highly focused on defense. If you tried to get in here and you weren't welcomed, you got to go up a ramp through a narrowing passage with defenders on your left and right. And the right-hand bastion was an important invention because for most people, the shield was on the left, the right was unguarded. Now you got people throwing projectiles at you left and right. It was very unwelcoming. So this is the famous Lion Gate of Mycenae. It's the first monumental statuary in Europe. this is an incredible structure. This is a tunneling effort they built to get water on the Citadel. It goes down, it must be 75 feet. And it's funny because when you start out at the top, it could be 90. When you get to the bottom, it's about 50. But they did have water, but through an amazing bit of engineering. This, just because you might have heard of it, Treasury of Atreus, it was one of the great burial vaults that they had for their elites, right near the Citadel of Mycenae. They're often called beehive tombs, and this is why. This thing is standing after 3,400 years, and amazing structure. So I'm going to show you very quickly two more, just to give you a sense of what these folks were up to. This is a citadel just a few miles from Mycenae called Tiryns. Massive, massive place, again, with another very complex, very amazingly engineered access to water structure. But there's, again, some people in the foreground that give you a sense of how incredibly massive the structure is. And these are galleries inside the walls. The walls are so big that they could have galleries like this for storage. This is my favorite one. This one's called Gla. This is a little more in the hinterlands, 2 hours northwest of Mycenae. It's 7 times the size of Mycenae, and it hasn't been excavated fully. And I guarantee you there's incredible stuff on this. I did some site survey work here, and what was just visible on the surface was amazing. So oftentimes people say, well, okay, all those other civilizations had writing. Did these guys? Well, yes, they have what's called linear B, and it is writing they did on clay tablets. So 2 problems. One is it was raw clay, so it would disintegrate over time. The only ones we have are those that were fired by being caught in a conflagration, if that's the right way to say it. And all these citadels were burned around 1200 BC. It's a whole nother story about what happened to these people, because they just basically disappear about 1200 BC, and the citadels are destroyed. So we do have these. The second problem with these is their accounting records is, 2,000 sheep and 50 jars of wine, and they're very dry. There's no correspondence. There's no epic stories. It's basically accounting. So they did have writing. What they had a ton of are weapons. They really liked their swords, and a lot of gold, a lot of values. The theory is that they were probably metal traders, and that's how they got it, their wealth, in addition to being very good at plundering and looting. And in fact, in the Iliad, Achilles' nickname is Sacker of Cities, and that wasn't casual. That was trying to be fairly accurate. But when the tombs in the grave circle A were excavated, they're just thick with weapons. And they were very much, as I said earlier, they were a tough crew. You wouldn't want to meet a couple of Mycenaeans in a dark alley. So one of the things that was wildly inaccurate in the promotional piece for Troy with Brad Pitt was his helmet. They had him in essentially a Hellenistic headpiece, which what they wore, the warriors at the time, and it's mentioned in the Iliad, actually, it's one of the sort of accurate pieces of the Iliad, are these amazing helmets that are made out of split boar's tusk. So think about it. You got to kill about 20 boars to get enough tusk to do a helmet. So I walked down the street, one of these, not that I care to these days, but one of these in those days, if anybody sees it, basically that dude killed 20 boars with a pointy stick. It definitely gave some credibility. So they were quite popular among the elite. And then again, these tombs were stuffed with pounds of gold and precious, very well worked, very finely worked jewelry, precious stones from the Middle East, Egypt. You'll see in the upper left there amber beads and more of these. Now, what's really amazing of these, in addition to its amber, is it came from the Baltic. So we're talking 1500 BC. Stuff is making its way from the Baltic, obviously other things going up in trade. And it's amazing. And not only that, but take this one, for example, where those spacer beads, the square kind of rectangular, the only place they were made was in Southeast England, the Wessex culture. And what's very cool about that is Wessex, England and Afghanistan were the only two known resources for tin at this point in time. Well, tin is critical to make bronze, and this is the Bronze Age, and you need 10% tin, 90% copper. So if the Mycenaeans were getting tin from Wessex, and they were certainly getting amber from Wessex, because those are Wessex culture spacing beads in the amber necklace, that could have been where they got their money, because tin was incredibly valuable. These are thin gold foil decorations that were sewn on to the funerary garb of the people who were buried in the tombs, and the cloth was gone, but the gold was there, and the famous tomb of Agamemnon. So now that there's a little bit of context, geography, culture, building, material, time frame. Now let's go to the investigative part of this of why haven't we found Achilles' citadel if he was the main proponent of the Iliad, and where might it be? So the first clue is what we get from Homer, because that catalog of ships has been so accurate relative to the rest. So the area that we talked about earlier of those three towns where the folks that went with Achilles to Troy, assuming that happened, are now the modern city of Lamia in Greece. And this is a satellite shot that shows that Spurchus River Valley, which is a really large, rich river valley, going down to a bay that you can see on the right, but that bay in Mycenaean times was about 20 kilometers to the left. So it was right near what would have been the Lamia of olden days, or where the Aqua Lamia, the Acropolis of Lamia is today. This is what the hilltop looks like from the village. Oh, I'm sorry, I meant to take this one out. So that last shot, actually, I took from a rooftop bar after a couple beers, and they only had a bathroom where they shared stalls, every women and men. And I go in and I thought, well, I don't get it. What am I not supposed to pee? And then I got it, and I've showed this to some guys, and they're like, I don't get it. What are they telling you? I showed it to some women. They're like, oh yeah, I get it. In fact, can I have a copy of that? I'm going to use it at home. So this is the Aqua Lamia of Lamia, and this is the modern wall. This building here is a barracks that the Greeks built years ago, but is now a museum, and a really nice museum. So I want to show you a few things from there, because what it does, it shows you, well, okay, but were there Mycenaeans in the Lamia area? And there were, and a lot of this stuff came out of burials that were found in the area of Lamia. So here's our boar's tusk helmet, beautiful jewelry, a Mycenaean war, another boar's tusk helmet. So this is not some backwoods hinterland if you've got this kind of work going on. Piles of high quality, palatial quality ceramics, just big quantities of it. And so we got this background walking in the museum and knowing, well, okay, they were here in the area, and we're trying to pin down, well, where maybe beyond just on the Aqua Lamia. This is an example of site survey work where we have people in each of those lanes going around a hilltop that we thought was probably occupied because it was right near a large cemetery. And then, every so many meters, you'd sink a shallow pit, look for particularly ceramics, and just survey the area. This is actually in front of a Mycenaean chamber tomb, a really nice one that had been looted. And the fellow who's running the dig is Christophilus McGinnis, who is my main professor at Dickinson and a Mycenaeanologist. This is really unfortunate, but I wanted to show you this because it's very prominent over there. The grave robbers will go through an area that they think is a cemetery, and they take metal rods and a sledgehammer and drive them down. And then if that metal rod drops or all of a sudden goes, quickly, they know they're above a void. And then they'll sink a hole. This is a looter's hole down into the tomb and loot it. And it's very frequent and common and sad. So now we're on the top of the Aqua Lamia. And another way that we try and figure out, well, where do you spend all that effort to dig is through geophysical exploration. And so you can use magnetometry, which is a way of working with magnetic resistance. You can use ground penetrating radar. And this was a pretty cool one that was done in 2019 on this site. This, I call it ERT because I stumble on the number of phrases there, but this gives you a heat map of what's down there and helps you figure out where you're going to dig. That's the museum barracks building in the middle. So now I've got the barracks to my back looking out on the surface of the Aquilumia, and the dig is there in the distance. So we're starting, and I really was there. This is the challenge. So now we got a site, it has had 10 cultures occupy it. We have to dig through 8 to get to the number 9, which is the one we're really interested in. But everything gets jumbled. People sink wells, people sink walls, people sink graves, and churn everything up. And it's a real mystery going down. So, you know, a typical grid square, 10 centimeters down, a meter square, you may end up with a bag of stuff that looks like this, where you've got lower left here, a really beautiful piece actually of a classical Greek oil lamp, and then common courseware and pieces from other cultures. It's confusing to try and figure out what is really going on here. So at the end of the day, there are piles of bags and tags of pieces of pottery. The little dish in the front, you wash it all, and then you have to categorize it, label it, make sure you got the right horizontal and vertical depth and location of it, because this stuff is very open to later study by somebody who's a pottery specialist of a certain era, and they'll come in and try and figure out where everything is. So you keep as meticulous as you can records of what's the grid square, what's the date, what pass was it in terms of the layers, and then is it just a general general pottery, or what they call diagnostic, which means it's special and has often markings on it. But this is the really cool stuff. So you're down there, you're digging, and next thing you know, here comes a little pot. And this one turned out to be a very nice little classical Greek, probably cosmetic jar. And you really rarely find the whole thing, but it is fun to come across something like this, where it's very nicely done and fairly well preserved. Another action shot. And here you can see there's Professor McGinnis on the left. Soil coming out into the wheelbarrow, Fine's desk behind where it's getting bagged and tagged and entered eventually into computer system. On the right is a sifting line where the buckets or actually the wheelbarrows go and the soil gets sifted. And it's quite a process. That's part of the sifting effort there. Now, I'm fast forwarding here for time, but we get down 9 feet and we start hitting Mycenaean things. This was a really nice palatial quality shard that came out as we were getting into the right cultural level. And when you get that kind of pottery, they're actually booklets of styles and progressions of design iterations that have been developed that give you a pretty accurate reading on that particular image tying into a particular time frame. This was another one, not as well preserved, but definitely Mycenaean. And this is an example of how it's confusing. We hit this wall and I thought, that's Mycenaean. It's got the right size rocks. It's got a nice clean face. The rocks have been nicely finished. It wasn't. So a really big thing that happens, and it's so frustrating in archaeology, is the next group in loves to look at what the prior group did as a free quarry of cut stone. So if you're a church on an island and want to build a church and there's a temple there, a heathen temple of beautifully cut stone, do you use that or do you go quarry your own and shape it all? So there are a lot of churches built with old temples. You go to a Crusader castle anywhere in the Mediterranean, Greek island, Turkish island, and you just look around, you will see completely deconstructed temples and pillars and just used to build the castle. And so here What it actually was is a later wall using Mycenaean stone to build it. But the good news was when we got through that wall, the one below it actually was Mycenaean. And the way you can tell is the Mycenaeans used a mortar mix where they used broken pottery as part of the binder. So if you go in and scrape the joints and you get out Mycenaean pottery, besides other elements that tell you that should be Mycenaean wall, then you know you have one. So here we are, last day of the dig, Christophilus, and wrapping things up, and it's to be continued, because what we've got here is proof that there were Mycenaeans on the Aquilumia. There were Mycenaean walls. We got their pottery. What we don't have yet are the real hard evidence that there was a palatial center there. So that will continue in years to come. That's my story. I'd be happy to take any questions if anybody. That was, I realized that was drinking from a fire hose, but it's a lot of years. Yes. I will. Yeah. So the question is, who owns the artifacts that come out of there? You know, one of the things that these guys really liked to make was fancy daggers that used exotic materials, ivory and silver, you know, kind of look like that. But it definitely is property of the state, and you get in very big trouble very fast if you go sideways with that. So the ownership is clear. You know, I'll tell you, it's fascinating to me, though, that years ago, the system was whoever dug got to keep half. They would divide the loot, the stuff, the artifacts in half. And the state, the sponsoring state, whoever it was, Egypt in those days, whoever, they got to pick which half they got. And the excavator took the other half. And that's how a lot of museums got a lot of their artifacts, was through that system. I forget that there's a technical name for that that eludes me, but today, none of that. Any other questions? Yeah. So the question is, if you have a site that expectations are high, that it's a valuable site, for example, Mycenaean Center, how would you go about starting? Well, unfortunately, I mean, one of the things is money, because these things are really expensive to bring. That was a very interesting thing about Lamia. Lamia, the city, is so, well, first off, they are in no guidebooks you look at for Greece. There's no El Lamia. So if they realize if they could find the citadel of Achilles in their town, that's a very big deal. So they actually paid for the room and board for the team. There's still other expenses, but the whole group that was on this, they picked that up. But to answer your question, the first thing, there's different types of research you could do. And like we did here, we do the offsite survey. And then you do the geophysical, because Gla is a really good example. That hasn't been really excavated. And so you'd have to figure out, well, where's the best place to start? Because we can only do so much in a season. And like Lamia is going to take 10 seasons probably to figure that one out. But you'd start with geophysical, assuming you had, let's assume you have the money. You'd start with geophysical, you do some test pits, and then at some point you'd go full throttle in the area you thought would be the most robust. I'm not sure if that answers exactly what you're asking, but it hits some of the highlights. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. So the question really is, once you've figured out where to dig, what do you start with? There's a surface layer that is sterile, typically, because so much soil gets laid down every year. And you can generally go through that pretty quick, not with a bulldozer or backhoe, but you can dig through it, pick and shovel, and you keep your eyes open for anything's there, but you go through it pretty quickly. And in Greece, the state requires that you have so many hired laborers from the ministry on your staff. And so they're quite happy to go down as quickly as they can in an area if they get the green light. So you go through that sterile area, and once you get to cultural material, you hit the brakes and everything starts getting much slower. But there isn't a point at which you're in there, having at it with a backhoe that I'm aware of. Any other questions? Yes.
The site you develop, does that become proprietary to your team in any way? And it's undisturbed until you come back in the following season? Or is this an open source thing that anybody that wants to come in that has a similar interest can come in and try to dig more in the site you develop?
Well, I'll answer that in sort of the official and unofficial context. Unofficial is if they don't have guards there, there could be some uninvited guests with long pointy sticks that are trying to figure out what else is down there. But this is on a relatively secure site because the museum has a lot of very valuable things. So there is year-round, day-round security on site. So let's take the unofficial visitor off. In terms of official, you have to have a license to dig in the site, and nobody else can dig there while you're doing it because they recognize you're putting a big investment into that. So in this example, Professor McGinnis has, I think it's like a 5-year commitment from the state government and the city to have at it and see what they can come up with. Then if he's justifying that situation, he could very likely get renewals on that. But it is exclusive. I think this answers your question. It is exclusive, and I'm sorry if I forgot to repeat that question, but it was what keeps somebody else from digging in the same area. It is exclusive as long as that license is in effect. They won't bring in another team to go, well, what do you think? Yeah. Yes. Oh, yeah, that's a great question. Let me make sure I got it right. Was there a particular geographic source where all that gold I showed came from? So the best thinking I think is that there was a trade network between, I'm going to call it Transylvania because that's basically where it was, up in the Slavic area, that had large gold resources at the right time, but they didn't have the knowledge to create bronze, and they probably didn't have tin. And so the thinking is that the Mycenaeans were trading bronze weapons to the folks up in the Transylvania area for gold, of which they had plenty of, but can't make a sword out of, well, I guess you can, but can't really use a sword made out of gold. And that was probably the source of it. Also now they've got these really refined chemistry related testing of the makeup of metals, but they haven't been able to trace gold yet. They have silver and a number of the others, but not gold so much. But that is where they think it came from. Or that's let's say that's the majority thought on where this abundant amount of gold came from. There was some in Greece, but at the time, they don't think it was mined in quantities like that. But that again is fascinating. Right? Think of the length of the trade networks, and gold's not light, and it's amazing. Yes. Yeah. So the question is, what defines the archaeological season? It's a couple things. One is, so these teams that go onto these sites are sort of a pyramid. You got the lead person, like here, Professor McGinnis, and then you've got a layer of highly specialized professionals like that one, and they're almost all academic professors. And so one might be lithics, stone, ceramics, geophysical exploration. I mean, it goes on. There's a bunch of them. Astrophysics. I mean, it really gets complicated. But so you got that layer of the pyramid. Then you've got a bunch of doctoral students who are getting credit for this by doing it. Then you have regular students in undergraduate, and then you have workers. So what answers your question on when do you do this? You have to do it when the academics are free, which is the summer. Now, the first couple of times I did this, it was in July. And I mean, Greece is not someplace you want to be in July. And we were out, that's, you got to give me the nod when I'm running out of time here, but okay. So that was exploring whether there was a lower town at Mycenae, because everybody knows the Acropolis, but there's this big expanse around it. And the question was, so was there a lower town? So we're out there excavating in this big open plain in July. It was unbelievably hot. We had to start at about 6 in the morning and stop by 1, or your head would just explode. And this year we did it in June and started early June. Man, it was a whole different world, like 80 degrees, and we were under trees, and it was way more pleasant. But the primary answer to your question is you have to be it when the students and the academics can do it, and that's only in the summer. And you push into July and August in Greece, and it's tough. So June is a nice month to do it over. May would be better, but they're still in school. One more. Anybody else? Yes, in the back. Okay, 2 questions. One was, were the weapons, mainly swords, bronze? Is that right? Is that okay? And the second one was, were there any other writing modalities than linear B on raw clay? So the first one, they were all bronze. And it's a whole nother fascinating story of how the Mycenaeans, it's generally assumed in a fairly rough way, took over Minoan Crete. The Minoans were fabulous bronzesmiths. They had the best weapons in the Bronze Age Mediterranean. The Mycenaeans literally brought the people up to Mycenae and had them make weapons, but they were bronze. The Iron Age starts around 1000 BC. Writing, there's some famous shipwrecks, and one of the things they found was a wood frame that actually matches a description in the Odyssey of a wax tablet. And so wax would have been in there for temporary writing. Because these records that are found are also administrative, there is thought there was probably another methodology. In fact, 30 seconds. I could go on for days. Linear B, having been adopted from linear A, which interestingly hasn't been deciphered, but linear B is a text that the specialists say, this really wasn't made for clay. This was made for something else. It's just not well suited for clay. It's kind of adapted to work with clay. So the thought is there was probably parchment or even wood or something else, some more perishable product that was used for more sophisticated writings. So the answer to your question, I guess, is probably, there was probably something other than, we know there was wax, but that was more of a utilitarian thing. But there probably was a different medium used for more sophisticated communication. Okay.
Thank you, Joe, for that presentation. I speak for all club members when I say I think we learned a lot today. I would specifically speak for the gentlemen of this club, saying we learned a lot about bathroom etiquette. I'm looking at you, Calvin Weary. Anyway, thank you for sharing that passion with us. We wish you all the best of success in your archaeological adventures. In honor of today's program, Joe has signed the book Two Little Trains by Margaret Wise Brown to be donated to the York Jewish Community Center's Child Care Program. So there you go, Brian. Next week, we are off-site. We are on the road to the South County Brewing Company, and today is the deadline to sign up for this fun off-site meeting. You must register to attend by contacting Becky Rook at the Rotary office. You could also scan the QR code that should be on the table. There's an optional tour and tasting at the end. It's an additional cost. In 2011, the South York Brewing Company began a small pole building tucked away in Fawn Grove, PA. The company now has 2 locations, including the newly opened flagship production tap room facility in York Township, which is where we are going to meet. South County Brewing Company prides themselves on quality of their product and scaling of their beer to meet the demand. Kelly and Sam Taroso, the co-owners, will co-host our meeting and tell us how they are different than most small startup breweries. They do not have the problem trying to sell their product. They quickly had the problem of not making enough product. And for our closing quote, provided by D. Baker, small acts of decency ripple in ways we could never imagined, or D, if I may paraphrase that a bit, I would say small acts of imagine the ripple effect from each of your small acts of decency. This meeting is adjourned.